Next podcast with Chris and Todd.
Hey, so welcome. You, whether you know it or not, you clicked on the next podcast, and I'm Chris, and I'm here with
Todd,
the one and only Todd. Sometimes Hot Toddy. Sometimes so his wife's name is Tina. Does Tina, when she is frustrated with you, ever call you by anything to really get the point across?
Sometimes it goes, the middle name gets thrown in.
Does
there.
it really?
Yeah.
From your wife?
Mm-hmm.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I could see that.
Yep.
I've known Tina long enough to say I could see that.
There's very few times count them on my hand. So
like, you remember that time back in 2017? That was a rough moment.
Yeah.
I don't think about that. I think Rachel's just more like the facial expression.
Yeah.
She doesn't go towards the Christian Douglas sword out. Get in here right now. Like, I don't know what I'd do if Rachel went all three names. I'd be like, why are you saying my name right now? Like, I already know you're frustrated. You don't have to emphasize it more. No, it started that way just because we're going to dive into just an episode on how to family or family matters. Like, it goes, go into
what is family?
Family Matters. Like, all I can think about is that TV show. Funny about that. I was watching TV the other day, and I was like, remember Full House? Do you remember that show?
Yeah.
And before I even realized what I was watching, I was like, that looks like, did they just repurpose the Full House kitchen scene? And then I realized it was the Fuller House, which I'm like, okay, well, whatever. So I watched for like 2 seconds, and I'm like, well, I miss the original Kimmy Gibbler, so I was like, I'm moving on.
There were so many family sitcoms growing up,
that's
and
right.
now they're not.
And they're all strange. There's all a much more hyped dynamic that is involved rather than anything else. Anyway, listen, we're gonna dive into a family, and I don't know like what's been going on in the Lynch household lately. I can tell you a lot. Thankfully, I have two girls listening to my podcast, so like. You try to balance those things like, what do we share? What do we not share?
Yep.
But, we're coming up on a special guest speaker here at church, Dr. Tim Elmore.
Yeah, it's probably already happened, and there it's going,
Hopefully you enjoyed it.
Yes.
I sure did, because I've been a Tim Elmore fan for a long time. Just a lot of different things that he has shared, and hopefully you gleaned, I don't use that word a lot either, but gleaned, like a middle name, gleaned a lot from his just presentation and the parenting workshop. And the biggest thing is, how do you put those things into practice? And how do you really walk out family now that you have more knowledge, or you're reminded, or you're challenged by something? Because as parents, we can't just rely on what we know now to get us through what's in front of us, because, man, it's changing.
Yeah. And he wrote a fantastic book. I read it, and it's 12 huge mistakes that parents can avoid. And so just great stuff there. But I think even just in our podcast today, it's just kind of like, okay, what are those building blocks that we've kind of learned along the way? And not saying we have it all figured out, or maybe what we've seen other people do, of just trying to be like, okay, as I navigate my family, and some of this will be, a family that, you've got some kids maybe, or it's a family like, man, my dynamics with my parents or with my siblings are starting to change, and is not what I expected. So how do I navigate that, and how do I stay even just, this is what family should be about, this is how I do it. And then even beyond that, like, I think there's a lot of dynamics within family, like, hey, what does this look like within church family? What does this look like with and people there's work family, people you do life with, starts to become that family.
Yeah, it is. And it's powerful. And it just starts by making some decisions, I think, that you want to see it gathered around. And that doesn't mean you don't tweak it, because there are times where you're like, this isn't working in this season. But I would say, like, just to start it off, just because it's been like in the forefront lately, like just a little chirping at the table. Like in our season, we have all girls in our house, and I've got one at college and three in junior high and one in high school, and just the way in which we talk to each other. Like, you and Tina can lay out the way you want your kids to talk to each other, and we've laid that out, Rachel and I have. But man, sometimes between the pressures of school and the things going on in their head and the ways in which, you're like, I just want to remind you, how you're talking to your siblings right now is not the way you talk to your friends, or, and it's just that's kind of a season we're in right now, just reminding them, like, hey, how you're speaking right now to your sisters, or how you're speaking to I don't know what thoughts are going on in your head right now, but I need you to be reminded that your words matter, and the thing, going back to that verse, and I can't remember where it's at, let your conversation be attractive and gracious, so it may benefit those who hear. And that's definitely something right now in this season we're pouring into our girls. Mm-hmm. It's not like they're like sitting at the table going, "You're the worst." I can't stand you. I can't believe you're here. But it's just
the side comments, right?
And granted, I'll be honest, like Rachel and I maybe have perpetuated some of that, little chirping or a little joke, because part of our family mantra is we want to joke and we want to be able to joke together.
Yeah.
And sometimes, it just gets carried away, and then, how my mind wanders. Like, I can't imagine teenage mind wanders and like your mom, whatever, and so that's kind of a season we're in right now. Just like reminding, like, man, the conversation that we have with one another and towards one another has to be valuable and uplifting.
I think you bring up something that's kind of fascinating to walk through as a family. It's like, maybe you have a value, like, hey, you're joking together, but then you have to rein that value. Okay, now we have to like even clarify, hey, we can joke, but there's a value. Now we got to add like, hey, like, let's be encouraging, or like we could joke and laugh with each other, but it cannot be we're making somebody feel less than, or tearing somebody down to get a laugh. And so it's, I know for Tina and I, like, it's been one of those things of like, okay, one of the things we value and is like, hey, we want you to be involved in part of church. Well, now that our kids are more just older and getting more involved in all the youth activities, it's kind of like, how do you keep that a priority, but let them kind of experience the things that, would be good for them. And so learning to kind of go, okay, they've got games on Sunday. We're still going to go to church, but it may mean, hey, we're going to this service instead of typically this service. Or if we're going to be out of town, we're still going to a church. And so you make that just a priority of just going and teaching them, because I want my kids to come out of the house and be like, no, church matters.
Absolutely.
And I need to be in church. And we're having similar conversations at home too, of just like, hey, that's not how we talk to each other, or just that's not how we treat each other.
I thought we would have had this figured out by now. No.
And our kids are, 4, 6, and 8, and 10. So there's still moments where it's like, oh, we're biting somebody. Like, no, this is not.
Thankfully, I don't have that in my house right now.
That.
Like, I don't have that situation.
But it changes.
Yeah,
it's like,
it does.
It's still putting that value of, hey, this is how we treat each other. But and that's the part I enjoyed. Like, kids are going to remember the values, not the rules. And the rules will adapt and change based on how they're growing up and maturing. But the value still remains the same.
No, I would agree.
And so I'd be curious, like, yes, you got one of like, hey, we're just kind to each other, but we joke around. What are some other values that you just have tried to or are working on implementing with your kids?
One of them is we serve. We serve as a family, whether that's Saturday serve or whether that's serving our neighbors, or whether it's serving at church. We want our girls to find a place. And 2 out of 3, Morgan's at college and she serves in kids ministry there, which is a perpetuation of her desire to find a place to serve. So that's big for us. We like to laugh. Laughing is a big one. We want to be able to have moments where we can laugh at ourselves and laugh with one another. So those are 2 that are important. Another one is having a devotional time together every night. When we talk about it at church a lot too, and I think it's an important thing, like time around the table for supper, but then a devotional time before we spend the night, go to bed and go our separate ways. So those are 3 that I think, laughing and serving and just time, intentional time around the table. And then whether it's a quick devotion, we have a book. That's what works for us. And then everybody prays. And, we could spend a lot of time. I think we talked about it, when a couple seasons ago when Heidi was here and just, do you make them pray? Yeah. Whether it's just thank God, because I want that to continue to be a rhythm that they have prayed, they know how to pray, and that they can articulate a prayer when they leave my house. They know how to serve when they leave my house, because eventually one of the biggest responsibilities we have is raising kids to leave our house. And there are some things that are big things for me that I want them to know when they walk out that door. So
was there ever a value that you weren't expecting to kind of like, oh man, didn't see this one coming? Or was it just one you felt like you had to focus on more just because of how your girls acted or anything like that?
I think that walking into the idea of being a dad of girls, I really thought that I would have to battle like self-perception. And we tried right away to be like, three opinions matter, mom and dad's and God's.
I've heard you say that, yeah.
Yeah, and that for us has been like, that was something that we're like, okay, walking into this, we know that guys and girls can be intense and harsh. And we wanted early and often to know that listen, I need you to run this through the process of why this opinion matters to you. And, that was big, and that was exciting for us to be like, okay, hey, here we are, it hit the fan. Whose opinion matters? Why are you giving that voice credence? They're not for you. They're not speaking truth and life into you every day. And, and so, and it's fun when you can sit down with your kid and go, okay, hey, help me understand something. Why is this voice so strong right now in your life? As far as one that surprises me, no, I don't know if there's one that surprises me, that to think off the top of my head.
Okay.
No.
I was just curious.
Generosity, maybe. I always love it when my kids are more generous than I ever thought they would be, and that's kind of one that we want to be a generous family. I know you talk about that too. And, but it's always fun when your kids take it to another level and like, I'm going to give this away. Why? Because I want to. And I'm like, well, man, kudos to you. That's awesome. So
I didn't expect, and it's somewhat of value, but more of a just training component. Like I just have a couple of my kids want to be the first at everything.
Really?
Like everything's a competition.
Okay.
And so it's like so they'll rush through schoolwork.
Yeah.
And when we get the grade, they're like, buddy, we didn't even put a name on this paper. What are we doing?
Yep.
And it's just like, hey, like slow down, like learn to. And so just things that I'm like I know T and I are like somewhat competitive, but not. I'm
not like that.
Man, you are on another level. And then you just got different like kids dynamics that you're just learning. Like I think sometimes the hardest ones to train or coach are just things that you're like, I don't get this.
Yeah.
Like,
this is coming out of left field.
Why can you not focus, or why can you not just take a pause and process this? And sometimes it's hard, but it's just like as a parent, you're like, I didn't struggle with this, and now I got to teach somebody how to do this. That's okay.
I'm thankful. That's funny you mentioned that. Like these aren't big things, but they're like small things where you're like, why are you taking so long in there? Like, or what?
Right.
And you know what I'm talking about. Like, why are you taking so long by yourself right now? And you're like, I need you to hurry up. And and that's the different part. Like, you've got to parent every kid differently. Like, one is fast and one doesn't care. And I've got one that is just not fast at homework. Yeah. She just isn't. And you're going, because you have to balance that, like from what you remember your kids, and one faces homework emotionally. And I think, so going back to something that we decided to do, or I guess I decided to do, and Rachel's like, man, I agree with that. Tim Elmore has some books called Habitudes, and I'm sure he'll probably talk about them, but Habitude books are how to lead yourself, how to lead others, how to work well, and just kind of walks through a progression of 4 books, that his initial 4 books of Habitudes, that, man, I think it's important for kids to hear what you say as parents, but for them, these are just devotional with word pictures and stuff that I've made my girls walk through as they get to that middle school age, where it's just vital for them to understand you need to feed yourself, or you need to not be affected by this, and you need to understand that this is important. And so it's been fun when they can articulate those things, and you're like, oh, you picked that up in the book, and I love it, and it's fun. But parenting kids differently probably caught me off guard more so than anything else. Just having to adjust to the ways, because you get used to one, and then another one throws a curveball at you, and you're like, where'd that come from?
Right.
Like,
well, and I think you got your values that you're trying to like over, and maybe you have not sat down and like wrote them down on paper, but you are putting values in.
Yep.
Like, what you deem as important is shown by the time that you spend on things, or the money you spend on things, and your kids will pick up on that. They will drastically notice, like, oh, okay, so you made time for me here.
And
so
a challenge to parents. Your kids, whether you've stated them or not, know what your values are.
Right. They may not be able to verbalize them, but they go, that matters to you.
Yep, absolutely.
And so, and it's evident, like even And my kids, and some of this I want, like, yes, I work a ministry job, and so there's nights where I have that, but it's like, okay, Dad's got to go do these things. And part of that, I do want them down the road to be able to go, hey, like, there's times where the mission of what God has you doing is important. But that does not mean it overtakes your kids all the time.
Yep,
absolutely. And so you got to make, and so for me, there's just this kind of line that I want to walk of like, yes, what the work that God has for you matters, but also the family He's given you also matters. And so learning to value both
absolutely
is important. And so, right now they're going to focus on like, well, Dad, when did you make time for me? And I want them to be able to go, you were there for these things, you were there for those things, and showing up as I think a big part of it. But also we've started being like, hey, let's read together, let's do some devotions together, and driving them to school, those kind of things. You just get moments that you're just like, hey, like I want these.
And time always matters. I would say, and I know you know that, like time always matters. The time that you spend, whether that's daddy-daughter dates or father-son dates, or just hanging out dates, whatever. And that, is that press start? Is that just getting ice cream? Is that going shoe shop? Like I went shoe shopping the other day with one of my daughters, and she got done. She's like, that was awesome. That was it. And because she got some cowboy boots, which I was pretty proud of her. That was a good day. Anyway, but just those moments of time matters, and your time that you mark out for them specifically. And if you've established that and you go away from it, they'll be quick to remind you, just the same way, like, hey, you and Mom haven't had a date in a while. Well, just so you know, we switched at lunch dates because we're busy with you every night, and you have to make adjustments with your spouse too. And you and your spouse have to be on the same page, because maybe there's definitely a time where your kids need time with the wife or time with you. And shout out to single parents that are doing those things all by yourself and battling and hopefully, you have a network or people around you that you can look at and be like, hey, I want to encourage you, but seek out those resources, those things that are vital and important. So
I think with a conversation we have at church a lot is like, hey, what are you doing with your time? What are you doing with your treasure? What are you doing with your talent? And I think that conversation plays out just like we're creating a church family happens within that. Hey, when you give time to connecting with people, when you give time to serving together, when you give that time towards just building relationships, well, then that makes the family be able to grow, church family be able to become the church family needs. Treasure, same deal. Like when we got to put some money behind that to make sure that those things are happening. And talent, like God's given you certain gifts. Let those things happen. And parenting, it becomes, hey, same conversation. What time are you giving to your kids? And what are you teaching them about the money that they get to sometimes have and use, but also watching you, how you spend it. But then also the talents, like, you're an adult now. You've learned certain things that they need to know how to do. And so you have those talents that you're passing down. And so I've kind of always taken those three and be like, okay, God, what do you want me to do with those three with my family? And so how I lead that affects how the church family will go. It'll affect how work family will go. It also affects how just my family will go. Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun when you sit back and look and just because I've got the privilege of watching Morgan like take those steps out of the house and watch the way that she does certain things. And I'm like, oh man, you're already doing that way better than I did, and I love it. I love being able and switching that relationship to, man, I just want to encourage you in this. You're doing a great job. Keep it up, and continue to perpetuate those things that you want to see and that you're doing right now as you step in. I was going to ask you about that because I do think that's the thing that happens within families. Like I remember like you'd be around your grandparents a lot more, and then now you see them less as you sometimes get older, unless your grandparents are right, next to you. But some of us don't have that. Yep, absolutely. Or just those kind of dynamics. So you've got, Morgan was in your house all the time. Yep. And now she's out. And so you're learning to adjust. And that, what have been some of the key things that you've learned as a parent to like, hey, how do this relationship changes, but how do I keep it healthy? Man, I think intentionality. What are those ways that I want to be intentional with her? I mean, I'll just spill the beans. Like I write her every week. That's one of the things I want to communicate, like with a handwritten letter and just be like, hey, I love you. This is a thought. Maybe it's just what's been going on in the house, or maybe it's a thought that I had. I just want to encourage you on this. The willingness to listen. And I think that's something that we miss as parents. We want to force our kids to talk. Listen, when our kids are ready to talk, they're going to talk. And we have to shut up and listen. And so I want to be available to listen to whatever she's got. I also know that she's not calling me to solve her problems.
I still need her to process those things, and she is. And I think that's one of the cool things that I've been able to see is her ability to process stuff and go, wow, you thought that out. And I just want to take a minute to just say, way to go. I think that's awesome. Just one of the things that I want to learn is, as she got closer to leaving the house, there were some things that I, as a dad, I wanted to do intentionally, just a reminder, and not be like, hey, let's sit down and let's talk about 10 things that dad wants you to understand about boys before you leave. No, but just conversations that were directed in a specific way that said, okay, hey, what do you think about this? And just to make her think about those moments. And that was fun. And I look back now going, man, those were great conversations. And I just remember sitting down with her in those times of, man, watching her become something that I always hoped she would become. And so
I think what you said there was great. I think the intentionality part is so vital. So, because whatever your family dynamics are changing, because I think that it's whether you got a kid going out of the house or, hey, we used to live close to a lot of family. Now we're farther away. And so having that, like, no, I still want to stay connected. You got to fight for that connection. But then I also think it's letting go of some things too. Like, no, I'm not her problem solver anymore. Used to be, but not anymore. And it changes the relationship. And so some of that I think is not always like easy to be like, but it's the right thing. It's the maturing thing. And I think even for ourselves, recognizing like, hey, our family is changing. Our family dynamics are changing. And so sometimes that's just reality of life.
Yeah, it
and
is.
Learning to be able to go, am I ready to adapt?
Yep. And adapting to seeing them at different stages, being intentional about the time, like Rachel and I went down here a couple weeks ago just to spend time with her. And that was great. But, I think for sisters, looking forward to other times together. And that's, that it's weird. There's an empty seat at our table every time. And so, they miss her, we miss her. And just those moments of going, okay, the dynamic shifts, but we still talk about her. We still, have her in moments where we're like, hey, you're on the FaceTime with us right now. Why don't you pray with us? And, and just finding intricate ways to just kind of include her in those moments, even though she's gone.
I just think like, man, when I was growing up, I had my brothers, like when we were constantly together, constantly together. And then, God led us, we're all over the place.
Absolutely.
Like, across different states, all that kind of things. And so we're still very connected, but the relationship has changed. Like I can celebrate from afar, but it may not be as close as what it once was. And so those are just things that it's just kind of, okay, this is part of life, and learning and growing in some of that. And so I just know for all of us, we're all going to deal with different things. So sometimes when it comes to how to family, it's like, okay, learning to be intentional still, but also learning to let things go in a healthy way so that I can adapt. And I think some of this is learning to be like, there's going to be new people at my table. My kids used to be there, but now they're somewhat there, but they're not as often as it used to be. So there's got to be some other people, because it just can't be like, okay, well, my table is just empty now. You're going to have to be like, hey, who's kind of my new people that maybe they're not new, but you're allowing them in more.
Absolutely.
And so that becomes a critical part, I think, of life, to where different stages happen.
They do.
Like when we were young adults, we had a lot of young adults sitting at our tables. But then it became, now we've got kids, and so we got a lot of kids. And so it's harder to put more people sometimes around that table. You're like, okay, I want to have some adult friends. But then that goes right back to that once your kids are out of the house. And so it's learning still how to, and that's where church family, work family, all those things kind of play into like, hey, who's at your table and how are you pouring into them as a family? Yeah,
and I think others have to be, we talk about values, others have to be a part of that, that value system. And whether, start it now. Like, I love it. The girls bring friends home on Wednesday night, so they go to youth. And so there are people that we don't normally get to see, and it changes from week to week, sometimes. And so that others component is so vital, because if others aren't a part of that dynamic, like you're talking about, you're going to miss out on moments to connect or invest or just, you know what, maybe this is just a stop off, and that's okay. And so, and not saying they have to sit at your table forever. They're just, again, you go back to seasons that whoever's there, you want to be faithful to love on, to encourage, or to hopefully let the best of your family dynamics and family values come out and be present. So, yeah.
Because I think of like for you, it's like Morgan hasn't left your table.
No.
She's not there as often as she used to be. But also you're teaching her, you need to create your own table.
Yep. And she is,
and you're gonna have other people starting to sit there.
Yep. And kudos to her. She has a table of friends that she just dives into, and I couldn't be more excited, except for sometimes boyfriend stuff, whatever. That's eventual. And
Dad would like to control that seat.
Listen, because
we'll decide who sits here.
I know people are listening right now like, oh, that's eventual. You better suck it up, Dad. Right. Listen, I am. It's just, listen,
it's hard.
It's my podcast. Leave me alone. Right. Come on. No, I'm just kidding.
But I think that's a lot of parents go through that.
Is.
Like you used to be in that seat of like, I'm going to go to you for a lot of things. And that seat changes.
Yep. And the time.
And you shouldn't be in that seat all the time.
I know. That's just an awkward moment. No, but it is fun to watch her and the people she invests in, and and the ways in which she loves her friends and encourages and just walks even the conflict out with them. And I think that I want that to be encouraging for you. Like if you're willing to invest now and walk that out and coach them and love them, man, then you get to cheer them on and tell them, hey, way to go. I think you handle that well. And just those different moments. So
I think trying to sum this up, and I know family, you got so many things.
We could spend a lot more time
on
this.
But I think I like that just analogy and visual of just like, okay, who's at our table and what values are we teaching them? Because they're going to
take those someday.
They're gonna go, and then you're going, okay, how can I help my kids set up their own table?
Yeah.
And then it's theirs to run. But also we're doing that for so many other people. When it comes to our church family, how are we helping other people set up the table that ultimately God is leading,
mm-hmm.
God is there showing them, but we get a lot of choices in that God's given us.
Yeah.
And so that's where the value comes in. But you're teaching them and training them along the way, but also you're teaching yourself and training yourself, being like, okay, am I ready for my table to switch and people to come and go in that? And not in a negative way. It's just what happens in life.
It does. And man, I hope you're ready for it. It's an adventure and it's a lot of fun. And so the time and the attention and detail you put into it, it matters. And so continue to give your best. Continue to learn and grow. And sometimes, again, for you and Tina, for Rachel and I, it's growing and understanding that, hey, maybe we need to shift and we didn't do it right. But the ultimate goal is to trust God and believe God for the best in what's going on in your family right now. So
there you go.
Hey, rock and roll. Hey, have a great one. It's been fun spending time with you, talking about family.
It is. Family's awesome.
All right, rock and roll. Have a great day.
See ya.